So this year, one of the things I wanted to do more than anything was get through my to-be-read pile. So reading all the books on my shelf that I haven't read before, not even once really. And so yeah, I've been using Goodreads, so I set up a Goodreads account, and these are the books that I've read thus far in January. As I said in the update video not so long ago, I'm going to be doing these kind of overall reviews of what I've read each month going forward, and hopefully I will get 148. But I know that one of these books was already a book that I didn't own at the start of January and I bought, so technically there's only 9 off the original list, and I've added an extra one, so it's 149, but there's an extra few more as well. It's all getting a bit confusing. Either way, I'm sure I'll level it up and work it out by the end of the year, but this is January anyway. So I'm going to go in order for a start, and I'm going to start with B.P.R.D. Omnibus Volume 8, but I'm going to include as well Volume 7. Volume 7 I finished reading just going into the start of January, and then I just continued straight on reading Volume 8. And for those of you who watched my best favourite reads of the year, this was placed among them, so certainly watch this video and find out what I thought of all of that reading experience. But it goes without saying that the B.P.R.D is one of those series that I slept on a bit because I didn't actually continue reading it originally, and I'm gutted that I didn't, because I'm enjoying these later kind of Hell on Earth volumes far more than the earlier volumes, because they just all out chaos and madness. Like, the world has just been taken over by these beasts and monsters, and you have no idea what is around every corner at all. It really is just such a bizarre world to be a part of, I think. So genuinely, I'm super excited to continue reading, volumes 9 and 10. 10 will be out soon enough. It's not even following necessarily the main characters anymore, because it even brings in new teams and new people all over the place, and sometimes they're just there for like a story arc, sometimes they'll come back or be part of the main cast, but it doesn't really affect the enjoyment, because the environment these people are going through, that's what they're all sharing. So the shared experience of different elements of this kind of world that's been infested slowly with gigantic monsters, it's just great to have a wander through. And yeah, I'm just loving the whole B.P.R.D, tale from start to finish so far. And yeah, and these two are definitely kind of keeping it going forward. Volume 8 in particular, Volume 7 actually in particular, rather than Volume 8, was all out madness, and Liz Sherman and a few other characters did some astonishingly mental stuff in it, which was amazing to behold and to watch and to just experience the heights that these characters are now kind of reaching after volumes upon volumes of watching these characters, and now seeing them just explode in really bombastic literal ways. It's great. So next on the pile was Monk. It was one of those books that I saw the artwork of and I was just like, I gotta have that, because there was just something really aesthetically pleasing and nice about the art that it just really captured me instantly. And so I jumped on it as soon as I could, bought it, and it was delivered, and I read it as soon as it got posted through my door. Any music lovers, for a start, will love this book, because it almost visualizes music in its pages. It kind of has got a rhythm and a musicality to it. Generally, if you've never heard of Monk or Thelonious Monk or anything, or you like jazz, there's still lots to like about this book, I think. The artwork, for a start, is stunning, I think. It's really inventive and really does some amazing stuff with page layouts and other things. But also, it's a really sweet, tender story about two people, because it's not necessarily all about Monk, it's about his friend as well. So Thelonious Monk, it was this jazz musician who rose to prominence really throughout the 40s, 50s and 60s, but he had a lot of mental health issues and a lot of kind of creative ups and downs and a lot of issues with life in general. So it follows his story, but it also kind of follows a friend of his who's called Nika. She's one of the Rothschild kind of heiresses. She's got a fortune and she just adores jazz and meets Thelonious Monk and just wants to be a part of this world. The relationship is totally kind of one of absolutely mutual respect and love, but not in any type of sexual or romantic way. It's one of those stories that are just kind of, they just love being in each other's company and they adore music. Like, he adores being around her because he absorbs the love that she has for music, and she adores being around him because of his creativity, of his unrivaled creativity. It's amazing. So it jumps in between their individual life stories, they come in together stories, and lots of other elements. The book starts off with Thelonious Monk really in the downturn of his career, coming towards the end of his life, and he sets the scene beautifully there as well, talking about Ronald Reagan and assassinations and stuff like that. Instead of even going, 19 whatever, it actually kind of sets the scene more to give you an indication of kind of, the world the Thelonious Monk is now. Actually, at the back, the author says that he wanted to create a book that was kind of a physical manifestation and a visual manifestation of jazz and jazz music and that free form kind of freewheeling nature. And he really has captured that, because it is quite, patchwork in places. But even then, when he shows the jazz clubs and when he shows Thelonious Monk creating and composing music, you can almost hear the music, you can almost feel that kind of musicality and movement to the scenes. It really is a wonderful read, I think. Very sweet, very tender, but a really strong story of a music artist and a fan and how they came together and how they really made a massive impact on each other's lives. Next was Monica by Dan Clowes. Now, Daniel Clowes is one of those writers that I have very much a love kind of hate relationship. There's not a lot in between us with Daniel Clowes' work. Whenever I read something by him, I either just laugh my head off, or I'm really moved and intrigued by it, or I just hate it. There genuinely isn't an in between. This book kind of as unwittingly become an in-between, because I really loved certain parts of it, but then I really hated certain parts of it, which is kind of why my Goodreads score is kind of 3. It very much has some elements that I thought were astoundingly strong and impactful and wonderful storytelling, and then other moments where the story just goes in such a different direction, and these classic Daniel Clowes digressions within the text and art just kind of annoy me in this book. But either way, it is the story of Monica, who is essentially trying to piece together her childhood and trying to find her mother, because she was adopted at a young age, and she's trying to figure out why she was adopted, trying to piece together her life. And so it jumps to and from different periods of Monica's life, but as you could expect with Daniel Clowes, is nowhere near as straightforward as that. She gets pulled into various cults, the story gets ever more deeper and complex and strange, and it's interspersed by weird kind of stories of villages filled with strange humans, blue people and different things like that, and people being killed and witches and loads of weird stuff going on. And for the life of me, I thought that they were going to kind of almost bring together these random stories with the overall narrative of Monica, but it doesn't really happen at all unless I've missed it totally. I think the Monica sections of this book are standout, and then I think the bits in between are okay if they were in a totally different book, maybe an anthology or something totally different. But for me, they didn't thematically tie in too deep, and they didn't have much impact on the narrative at all. The art overall, I love Daniel Clowes' art. There's no doubt in my mind about how much I admire his creativity and his art and his kind of almost his weird view on the world through art. But yeah, this one was a bit of a middle of the ground one, and the ending was frustrating. And yeah, that's all I got to say really on that one. Blood of the Virgin was an absolutely fantastic read. I wasn't expecting anything from this book at all, but it really blew me away. And it blew me away because it was just about everyday people, really. It was just about a normal kind of couple who were, coming of age, becoming new parents. One in the B-movie film industry and the other his wife. The book tells a few different stories at once, and it balances them all very well. So you've got that very realistic story of a relationship. Both the participants in that relationship, husband and wife, kind of want to escape, and they want to kind of break loose and try to chase their youth and not grow old and be parents and all that. So they're having kind of a midlife crisis, but not to that extent. It's not really overwhelming them. They're still getting on with their lives, but it gets more prominent as the story goes forward. But then our main character is actually making a movie as well. He's had a film script accepted, and he's trying to direct that and produce it and be a part of that world as well. It's a really intriguing view of 70s filmmaking in this context as well. And so that story takes you through the majority of the book, this struggling couple, him struggling to make this film, all that type of thing. But then, now and again, at different points of the book, seemingly random stories are slotted in that do, and like Daniel Clowes' work, tie in with the themes and the stories of the book massively. Two of these shorter stories in particular really caught my attention and imagination, and they stood out, and I would have paid money to have them as a standalone book, to be honest, because they were that good. One part of the book goes into full colour, and it tells the story of this guy who grows up on a ranch, grows up kind of, as a nobody on a ranch, and then gets pulled into the film industry and slowly works his way up and to have rivalries with his friends and companions. And it just shows this whole guy's life story over so few pages, but it's so wonderfully done, and it's got so much emotion and reality and kind of pathos and loads of stuff going on. It was wonderful, I thought. Then the second bit is a build-up to the wife of the story. I forget her name, I'm sorry. The names are not sticking in my head for whatever reason. But either way, her mother is a Jewish immigrant to New Zealand. And it shows her story, and it shows it in a silent way. It shows her being kind of, taken away from Budapest in 1942, going to concentration camps, going through all this hellish torment in different ways. And it basically is this story of a Jewish person going through the Holocaust in 1942 in total silence. The idea of leaving that dialogue free was a real genius move, really, because I think any dialogue in that moment would have really affected the pace of it. It was just so much stronger, just silent. But yeah, I loved this book. I thought it was really good, and I can't wait to reread it. Toussaint L'ouverture and Successful Slave Revolt. I visited this book in my extraordinary 3 debut graphic novels video, and I've spoke about it in multiple places, so I'm not going to talk about it here again. I'm going to refer you to that video that I made earlier, but this was a fantastic read, I'll say that. Lovely non-fiction book all about the history of, Haiti and the slave revolt, and Toussaint L'ouverture. Very good read. Watch that other video where I have a massive deep dive. The same goes for this next book as well, which I had a massive deep dive on the video, and that's in my extraordinary 3 debuts and in my top 5 reads of 2023 as well. This was a fantastic non-fiction biography of Adele Rodriguez, who is an artist in America, but this tells the story of him growing up and then leaving Cuba in 1980 amongst this wave of people leaving Cuba to try and find a new life in America. But it focuses so heavily on his childhood in Cuba initially before leaving, and the kind of traumatic nature of what the family and he went through. Again, watch that other video. I'm much more eloquent in that, I think. Don Quixote de la Mancha, Volume 1. So yeah, I say de la Mancha, it's just Don Quixote, but you've always got to give it a bit of melodrama, a bit of stage presence. But this is by Rob Davis, a British cartoonist, and his graphic novel adaptation of Don Quixote. This is Volume 1 of a 2-volume set. It is out in hardback as well. This I had mixed thoughts on because there was something off. I love the story of Don Quixote. I've read the book as well by Cervantes, this kind of Spanish tale of a bibliophile, I think they call him, or but someone who's just kind of driven themselves mad by reading books on knights and chivalry, and convinces himself one day that he is that and leaves out on his adventure. So it's steeped in black humour and kind of farcicality. So there's lots of jokey moments where he's getting beat up, where he's mistaken, prostitutes for amazingly beautiful princesses, and loads of stuff like that, as you can imagine. But there was just something that wasn't quite right with this adaptation. The artwork I didn't have a problem with. It looked wonderful. But I think in the original book, because it had a lot of descriptive text describing the scenes and describing Sancho Panza and Don Quixote, so there was almost like a discovery read in the descriptions, and they were funny when you read the descriptions of the person, piecing together what was going on in their dress, in their mind, in their actions by the descriptions. The artwork is doing the descriptions, and it's just dialogue heavy with a bit of narration. I think I realised when reading it that the funniest, the most engaging bits of Don Quixote, the book, was when when Cervantes would explain exactly what's happening in the scene, like on minute detail. And the book kind of lost that fun and that funny comedic element by subtracting that. It might not be that. It's the best I could do with the war, because I am confused why I didn't love this loads, but yeah, it is what it is. I'm on to volume 2 now, though, and I'm going to read that, and hopefully volume 2 will help shape that book going forward a bit. Inside the Mind of Sherlock Holmes, what an amazing book. I will say, though, the pace of this book, it almost feels like you're having a heart attack sometimes, I think, because the pace of the book is relentless. It's like Holmes and Watson running around London at full pelt, figuring stuff out at 100 miles an hour. It genuinely is probably like being inside Sherlock Holmes' mind. It's an original Sherlock Holmes tale with so much kind of convoluted twists and turns. That's good. It's not a bad convoluted twist and turny plot. It's good. I thought it was great. I've never seen such an ambitious book for panel layouts, for page layouts, for using, maps and using architecture and using views inside his head, using his fantasies, using his mind maps, using loads of stuff to visualize what it is like to be Sherlock Holmes, and he really gets across that. And again, that's probably why the pace is so frenetic and fast, and that's my only complaint about it, actually, is the way you read it, because there's a rhythm to the writing, I think, that speeds everything up, and it really does feel fast, and it kind of can be overwhelming at some point because there's so much going on so quickly. But that aside, it really is such a strong read, and if you love Sherlock Holmes, then there's nothing not to love. They even do these little fun things on pages where they leave like little blank spots that you hold up to the light and look through them and reveal like a secret or a picture of someone in the plot. And so there's so much imagination and creativity going on. I'm definitely going to jump in and read more of these series, and hopefully the artistic team, the creative team, stays stable, because I haven't looked, much past this first novel if the creative team mixed up, but the artistry on this was superb, and the creativity, and it was just great. It was a solid, good, Sherlock Holmes mystery tale as well. An Iranian Metamorphosis is a fabulous book, and it's almost like two kind of distinct books, I would say, because it starts off with our main author and artist being imprisoned for creating a cartoon that had a lot of negative press and got a lot of people angry, and so they put him in prison, apparently for his own protection, but then it wasn't for his own protection. There was loads of stuff going on. Either way, he ended up in prison. So you've got that. You've got this cartoonist creating art, and creating rather simplistic, basic art that you wouldn't think is that controversial in the slightest, to be fair. It's so uncontroversial, it's ridiculous, actually. But either way, he ends up in prison, and he's fighting his court case, and how it affects him mainly is the story. We get little glimpses as to how it affects his family and his partner, but not much. You mainly following him in prison and getting an indication of what it's like in prison in Iran. And it's a really telling story about kind of political prisoners and stuff like that, because of how the justice system works. He's in prison, and he's in prison for quite a long time, and he isn't really formally charged with anything, but he's terrified for his life inside and outside of prison, so he's really in a bad place. But then the second half of the book, almost, and it's not a complete half really, but he gets released and he tries to seek, asylum and safe haven in other countries, but he doesn't get anywhere. So he decides to do things illegally. And so then the book almost shifts tone and pace, and is following him trying to go through the processes of paying people on the black market to actually get him out of this country. And he really doesn't hold back in describing what he did or how he did it, the people he paid, how he went about actually, breaking the law and trying to escape from one country to another. My only complaint about this book, actually, is that it ends rather abruptly, and you just want more. It felt like there was a lot more story to be had, and a lot more places the story could go. The art, black and white throughout, wonderful cartoon, and I think really imaginative, dives deep into his flights of fantasy and things like that. And yeah, really strong book. I thought I very much enjoyed this a lot, but I wanted more by the end. I wanted a lot more. I didn't want the book to end where it ended. I wanted to continue that story going forward. And so hopefully one day the author might return back to it. And finally, Sapiens, the graphic novel version, volume 1 of the graphic novel version of an immensely popular book. And this, I loved the information contained in this a lot. I loved the facts, and I loved the story of anthropology and of civilizations being created. But I didn't like the presentation of the book. I didn't like the colouring. I didn't like the artist. The artist was very good for a few pages, but for the entire book it was quite great in the art style. And by the end of it, I kind of disliked the art overall, because I think if it was shorter, it may have been kind of, a smash and grab type art style where I didn't dislike it as much. But because it's a long book with a lot of detail, you have to pay attention and read the pages. It is telling you about civilization being founded and about mankind being founded, and so it goes into so many different places, and I can't stress that the information is great. I've got no issue with that, but the presentation of the art and the colouring wasn't great in my eyes. But then the other thing is, it does quite an antiquated thing in comics, I would say, in terms of it puts comics within the book as well. So when it kind of goes away from our author talking to other people in the book, which is a great thing, by the way, as well, the main author is there and he's talking to his granddaughter and other people about these stories, and so there's a dialogue and that's to the story, and so they having a conversation back and forth, asking questions, and that's quite good really, because it gives a nice pace and a nice kind of order to the book. But every now and then it kind of zooms in on a story and tries to tell it more in detail, and so it gives these kind of prehistoric characters and other characters their own comics for a page or two within the main narrative. And it would have been okay if it was one or two or maybe three times to happen throughout the book, but it happens so much. I mean, just in the first 60 or 70 pages, there's about 4 or 5 different comics within the comics, and it seems to be the only technique they can use to break up the text and to break up the kind of expositional knowledge. But I quite like that debate, conversational kind of approach to imparting the information. It wasn't bad. The comic within the comic thing just came across as a bit annoying. And so overall the information was good, and I learned a lot that I didn't know in different ways. But ultimately, not the best in terms of the art and the way the story's told. There's not a great deal of creativity going on in how it tells the story, I don't think. That's all my reading for January 2024. I will leave you now, and I'll see you for one more of these videos at the end of February, or actually the beginning of March, or probably the way I'm going. But either way, thank you very much for watching. I will catch you on the next one.